Hello everyone and welcome to my fly bench. You know, when I talk to a lot of new anglers these days, they want to improve their catch rates. They ask me questions focused on where and when to fish and what flies to use. And while those are important and I don't mind sharing them, there's actually two factors that are even more important than those, and they apply to all areas of fishing. I pass along to them what an experienced angler once passed on to me when I began to fly fish seriously. He said to me, "Do you want to triple your catch rate? Then you need to pay attention to good knots and sharp hooks." Today, let's take a look at those. You know, no matter the line you're working with, all lines are compromised in their tensile strength when a knot is tied in them. Good knots lose very little of their tensile strength, thus their high percentage. Poor knots can lose a lot of percentage, 50% or more. Thus, an 8-pound test tippet tied with a poor knot is actually only 4-pound test now. What you want is some strong knots that won't compromise your leader integrity. Here are 3 that you can rely on. Our first knot is known as the improved clinch knot. With this knot, we take our tippet and run it through the eye of the hook, doubling back on itself. The next phase is to run that tag end around the main line 5, 6, or 7 times. However, due to the friction of this rope and the rebar, I'll only be doing 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. We then take our tag end and run it through the loop we made, sending our tippet through the eye of the hook, like so. The final step is to run that tag end one more time through the loop we made, just doing that. And with this knot, typically with tippet, you moisten it with lake water, river water, or even lick it with a little saliva. And that will aid in slipping the knot down. I'm not going to do that with this rope for obvious reasons. What we do is pull the main line down to the hook. And we just keep holding onto the tag end, pulling the main line. And what you get with the improved clinch knot is a series of wraps that looks as strong as it is. This is a high percentage knot that will not break easily. Our second knot today is the perfection loop knot. With this knot, we take our tippet and tie a simple overhand knot, one of the simplest knots we know how to tie. We want a fairly long tag end. When I'm tying it with tippet, I like 4 or 5 inches. With this rope, of course, I'm using over a foot here for the example. We want a long tag end because we've got a couple of things to do with that. First, we're going to draw it through the eye of the hook, drawing that knot up to meet the eye of the hook. Then we take this tag end and wrap it around the main line 4 times. Now, because of the friction of the materials that I'm using here today, I'm only going to go 3. Final thing we do with this tag end is we will draw it up through the original knot that we tied. And then we pull on everything, the hook and the 2 tag ends, the main line and the 1 tag end. And what we end up with is a very strong closed loop knot that will not slip shut. There we go. This knot, no matter how hard it's pulled on, will stay open. This is a great knot for fishing flies like chironomids, bloodworms, and leeches, as it allows those small flies to swing freely in the water and not look like they're stiff due to the stiffness of our tippet. We know we've tied this knot correctly when the tag end of the knot sits perpendicular to the main line. And of course, we'll cut that off prior to fishing. Our third knot is the Palomar knot. With this knot we take our tippet and double it over itself, like so. We then take the doubled end and run it through the eye of our hook. The next phase is to tie a simple overhand knot with the doubled end and the main line, like that. At this phase, we take this loop that we've got here and bring our hook up through it, like that. Then it's simply a matter of tightening up on your monofilament. Now, because of the friction of rope, it's a little more difficult to get the tightness where we want it. But one of the things you will observe when you see this knot tied is that double wrap around the eye of the hook. That forms a high percentage knot that you can trust to not let go very easily. You know, hook manufacturers these days are producing hooks a lot sharper than they did 40 years ago. Back then, some of the fresh hooks right out of the package might not be sharp enough to penetrate a wet paper bag. And while hooks are a lot sharper these days, things can still happen to them in the field. Thus, it's very important to know how to sharpen a hook. Your hook could get dull just playing several fish. Of course, you could get snags on weeds or logs, and your fly could hit your boat or a rock. Knowing how to properly sharpen a hook is going to save you a lot of time and effort in the field. Let's take a look at how we test if a hook is sharp and how to sharpen it if it isn't. I have here on my desk 3 different sharpening tools. On the far right I have a fine-toothed file. In the center, an Easy Lap diamond Honen stone. And on the far left, a plain sharpening stone. Let's look at how we would use any one of these to sharpen a hook. I prefer these for my tackle boxes as they do not rust in the marine environment. This is a great tool to use at home when touching up hooks before going out on your trip. Now, just how sharp should a hook be? Well, I've taken a new hook here to demonstrate what I'm looking for, and what I want is that when I take that hook and scratch it on my fingernail, it actually catches. It doesn't want to glide, and there's a point where you can stick it in and it'll actually hang from your thumbnail like that, and you know you've got a good sharp hook. There's what it should look like when it's sharp enough. Now, I've taken the liberty ahead of time of dulling this hook. In fact, I'll give it a few more strokes on the file here. Point down just to demonstrate a dull hook will just sort of glide on your finger and not catch on your thumbnail. Okay, now we're going to bring that back to sharpness using my diamond hone. And what I do there is I'll lay the hook flat on the stone and then tilt it up about 5 or 10 degrees and vigorously run it back and forth for just maybe 5 or 10 seconds. We're going to polish that hook point. Then turning the hook over, I'll do the same to the other side, lie it flat, bring it up 5 to 10 degrees, and give it a vigorous polishing there on the other side. And usually it takes 3 sides to get these sharp. And then what we do is we'll take the hook and we'll put it point down on the stone. Not the actual point itself, but the outside of it, and tilt it up about 5 degrees and give that a polish there like that, hook face down. After having touched up the point, we start to get a catchy hook again, and there we have it, a hook sharp enough to penetrate those bony areas of a fish's mouth. Believe it or not, there are areas in their mouth that are that hard to penetrate, and if that's the only place your hook point touches, you want it to catch and hold.